The League of Women Voters and the NAACP cannot endorse candidates, but all the candidates are free to share campaign materials, seek volunteers, and answer additional questions. Now let me introduce our Kansas State Senate candidates. In order as they are seated are Marci Francisco, Christina Haswood, Senate District 2, Patrick Schmidt, Vic Miller, Shanika King Sims, Tim Wible.
It's Tyler.
Oh,
It's
Tyler
Wible.
Tyler Wible, and Cynthia Smith from Senate District 19. Blue name cards indicate Democrats and red cards indicate Republicans. So we're ready to begin. Let's begin with our first question. What would you do to strengthen voting rights for all Kansans? You have 1 minute. We begin with Marci.
I'm supporting legislation to re-allow counties to issue voter identification cards. Our county clerk, Jamie Shue, helped many voters, particularly with those in nursing homes, get identification to be able to vote. Currently, if you have been a registered voter in a county and have moved within that county, you can cast a provisional ballot that can be counted. I would introduce a bill to make this statewide, so that anyone who has moved to a different location within the state can also vote provisionally and have that ballot counted. Even better, I condition to advocate for same-day voter registration. I'm going to suggest that we remove expiration dates from state non-driver IDs. I'll keep supporting efforts for a nonpartisan redistricting authority, and I'm encouraging you, those who are not yet members, to join the League or the NAACP and work for voting rights.
Thank you. Next we have Christina.
I will continue to support legislation that removes barriers to voting and continue to educate my colleagues on why voter suppression is linked to systematic racism. I will continue to fight against these anti-voter accessibility legislation that seems to find its way into our chambers. Policies that I would love to see happen include same-day voter registration, increasing voter accessibility no matter your zip code, expanding early voting periods, and although I've not served on our House Elections Committee, I did do some work with local KU students where we worked together throughout the interim to get a bill draft, making it more accessible for polling locations on college campuses. It was a proud moment when we got the bill draft, and I hope to help them realize that their voices matter too. I'm also very mindful that us marginalized groups, Native American community, where we gained and faced American Indian citizenship in 1924, and the last voter discrimination legislation the U.S. overturned in the 1950s.
Thank you. Next we have Patrick.
We need to do everything we can to remove artificial barriers to registration. That includes same-day registration. There are many people that live very far from registration. They don't know the opportunity. We need to increase voting by mail, making it automatic. And I think the one important thing that is not being discussed is we need partners in the legislature that will work to make this happen. With Republicans holding 69% of all seats in the Kansas legislature, if we want to get things done, and I'm here because I do and I will, we need to elect partners to the legislature that will make that happen.
Thank you. Next we have Vic.
Thank you. I'm very proud to have been the sponsor of what's known as the 3-day grace period that counts ballots that come in the mail that are cast on election day. Every year since that's been passed, they've tried to repeal it, and every year we've rejected that. I support the National Popular Vote Act. I support election day registration. I support the extended use of drop boxes. I oppose requiring birth certificates to register. In a nutshell, I support all measures that make it easier to vote, and I oppose all measures that make it harder to vote.
Thank you. Next we have ShaMecha.
So I think everything that everyone has mentioned so far is very critical. Being able to register same-day vote, being able to vote in different locations if necessary, so that it's maybe closer to your work versus your home, wherever you happen to be at that part of the day. I also think that it's important to talk about immigration and first-generation voters. There hasn't been a lot of conversation around how we manage that conversation and making sure that they are aware of their rights and making sure that they are well represented at the polls. Additionally, with ensuring that felons are able to get their voting rights restored sooner, instead of relying mostly on nonprofit organizations to be able to support felons being able to get their rights restored. We need more assistance at the county election office and in the Kansas legislature to make sure that we're getting people reintegrated in society through voting rights.
Thank you. Next we have Tyler.
I think the biggest part about increasing strength in voting is definitely the information, informing our youth and also our voters on how to get registered. We need secure registering. You know, everybody wants to be able to be heard, everybody wants their vote to count, and so the only way to really do that is by having secure voting. I do believe that felons should have a way to be able to, once serve their time, to come back into society and have their rights restored in the voting. You know, everybody makes mistakes and everybody needs to move forward, and everybody wants to be a part of this great nation to be able to contribute in the way that we can with voting. So with that, I believe that security is our biggest thing, and we need to make sure that we inform everybody on how to be registered, how to continuously be registered with changing values, how to be involved, and that local elections matter just as much as federal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Cynthia.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm a moderate Republican, and I find the activism by our Attorney General and legislative conservatives is out of touch with today's voter. I don't buy into the paranoia or the conspiracy theories about voting by non-citizens or duplicate voting. I mean, the data shows that the data, and they've never been able to find these people. I mean, the numbers are so minuscule. What we need to do is listen to our Secretary of State, Scott Schwab, and not Kobach, because we run honest elections in Kansas. An interesting thing to look at is the technology. I mean, we all rely on technology every day. And we all know that someday we're probably going to conduct all of our voting online. In the meantime, we need to make voting accessible to everyone. What disturbs me most is to be sure our elderly have access to voting. They may not have birth certificates, they may not have driver's license, they may need help to get to the ballot or to the polls, so we need to accommodate them.
Thank you. We're going to ask that everyone hold their applause till all the questions are asked to the end. That would help it go a little more smoother. Thank you. So next we're going to go to question number 2. Kansas overwhelmingly voted to protect women's reproductive rights in 2022. What would you do to protect these rights? You have 1 minute. We'll begin with Patrick.
I think it's unfortunate that since the August 22 primary vote in Kansas, Republicans have introduced a number of bills to further restrict abortion access, women's health care, and even contraception in Kansas. We need to do everything we can to fight these measures. I had the opportunity to meet with Gloria Steinem earlier this year, and she made the point to me that for too long we have underinvested in state legislatures to codify these protections and rights that we have built in this country. I will do everything I can at every opportunity to advance legislation that protects these rights. And unlike my opponent, Vic Miller, I will never coddle extremist Republicans in the Kansas legislature and support the so-called Women's Right to Know Act and other bills that would restrict women's access to vital health care.
Thank you. Next we have Vic.
Well, Patrick needs to know that in the last 2 years, I voted no less than 16 times against the anti-choice coalition. Unfortunately, Republicans did not get the message on August 2, 2022. The infamous quote from one of those legislators was, and I don't want to misquote her, "We need to have this information." This is about a bill we were debating. "We need to have this information so we can better decide what a woman should do." It should not be the decision of Republican legislators to decide what a woman should do. It should be a woman, her family, and her doctor. pure and simple.
Next we have ShaMecha.
For me, I think the missing portion of this whole conversation is the storytelling aspect. I think the fact that we haven't done hearings where we've been able to hear from women, families, individuals directly how abortion access, IVF access, contraceptive care has been impactful in a positive way in their life, has been very detrimental to the conversation at the state level, which allows individuals to continue spinning narratives that are not true about having care for those reasons. I think that that's the part that I would play in this particular measure for District 19, is that storytelling aspect, the pulling together of the community of how this is going to ensure that women and individuals have continued economic prosperity by making sure that they have access to abortion care, by being able to choose when they are ready to start their families.
Thank you. Next we have Tyler.
Yes. So I think the big part that a lot of people try to overlook on this is that the biggest part about women's reproductive rights is their health, and so we need to be more informative with going forward on increasing the understanding of women's health with how contraceptives work and how on more informative measures on preventatives. We shouldn't be spending public funding when it comes to abortion itself. I do not think that abortion is completely wrong. There's under the circumstances of rape, incest, and protection of the mother, we see abortion play a crucial role in the protection. And so women's reproductive rights, we really got to focus on the health aspect. We need to make sure that everybody's understanding, and we need to make sure that our funding goes more on the informative side and teaching on the preventative acts. Thank you.
Next we have Cynthia.
Well, the view expressed by the majority of voters in Kansas was clear, and I certainly respect that. I find it really insulting when conservatives say that the voters didn't understand what they were voting for. I've always believed there are times when a procedure that saves a woman from a dangerous pregnancy, or from a pregnancy due to rape or incest, or it's a pregnancy of a child, that's when it becomes needed health care. And regarding the actions by the legislature, I'm not interested in initiatives that are meant to intimidate women or to manipulate the law to make criminals out of women or their doctors. I won't support such work. Abortion is always tragic. I'm pleased that more is being done to assist women so we have choices other than abortion, and I would support those initiatives.
Next we have Marci.
Speak up, please.
The August 2022 vote did show that Kansans support reproductive health care. During the 2023 legislative session, I went through the state statutes on abortion care. Based on that review, Senator Holland and I introduced Senate Bill 206 to clean up those statutes by removing unreasonable provisions. Thanks go to the Kansas Supreme Court for the recent rulings upholding the constitutional right to bodily autonomy and determination that some of what the legislature has passed is unconstitutional. However, we still need to address insurance concerns. Abortion care is health care and should be covered by insurance. If re-elected, I'll reintroduce the bill with updates reflecting the recent Kansas Supreme Court rulings and continue to push for hearings and passage of this important legislation. I'll also continue to advocate for tax parity so that the state allows tax deductions for reproductive health care clinics.
Next we have, can we hold our applause, please? Next we have Christina.
When the legislature passed this in 2021, I knew I had to do something. I teamed up with a few of my colleagues and we launched an internship program called Bench Builders with 4 paid interns that summer. And in the summer of 2022, I was running for re-election unopposed, and I knew that I needed to take care of my own district so statewide resources could go to purple districts. I had a team of 5 college students from KU and Haskell, many from the 2022 internship. I fundraised for their salaries, I got them training, canvassing, and phone banking, and we even hosted a rally ballet called Mi Que Pro Mi Decisión, when we wanted to reach the Lawrence Hispanic community to let them know to vote no on August 2nd. I also collaborated with the Indigenous Community Center, and we talked about the realities of reproductive access in our community and hope to mobilize the Native vote. I've been honored to share about the great work Kansas has done from the White House and to be a resource to our administration, and to share while Kansas protected our right to abortion in 2022, extremists in the legislature have attacked it every sense at every opportunity they can.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to question number 3. The majority of Kansas support Medicaid expansion. Do you support the legislators' failure to bring it to a vote? Why or why not? What would you do if you were elected? You have 1 minute. We'll begin with Tyler.
Thank you. I think it's important to look at Medicaid expansion.
Tyler, can you speak up?
Yeah, can you hear me a little bit better? Sorry, I'm a little bit more soft-spoken. When it looks at, I don't believe in Medicaid expansion, but I do believe in reconstruction of Medicaid. When we look at how, as we're moving forward, as we look at how healthcare is more of a private industry, and we look at how, as the government's involvement's got into it, makes it very hard for average Americans to be able to afford it. As you look at government's involvement in anything, you see that the prices go up. I do believe that we do need affordable health care, but I do believe the only way to do that is through private industry. And statistics show that when private industry is involved and when the government is involved, it skyrockets prices. And the only way to get people to really fight, and companies, insurance companies, to really fight for their people to pay for it and to be able to afford it is by lowering their prices and not have an inflation, a made-up inflation. Thank you.
Next, we have Cynthia.
I strongly believe everyone should have access to health care and not just at the emergency room. I worked for 7 years for a group of safety net hospitals and clinics, the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth Health System, Providence Hospital, St. Francis Hospital, and we couldn't believe it when Kansas turned down billions of dollars for Medicaid expansion. It was very political. They were digging their heels in against Obamacare. I actually heard a conservative say that they can't expand Medicaid because there wouldn't be enough doctors. I mean, think that through. Since then, though, the ACA health insurance marketplace has evolved a lot, and it's my understanding that some of those who would benefit from Medicaid expansion actually already have access to very low-cost health insurance. I don't feel the taxpayer should foot the bill for health care when the working poor have health insurance options available to them for a very low cost. I'm hoping to be on the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee because of my background. I'm eager to look at all these issues.
Next, we have Marci.
More microphones.
I proudly voted on the bill for Medicaid expansion during the Brownback administration, but that governor vetoed it. Kansas has lost out over $5 billion that could have provided health care, helped shore up struggling hospitals, and lower insurance costs across the board. I'm appalled by the success of current Republican leadership to block hearings and, in addition to seeing that a bill doesn't move out of committee for a yay or nay vote on the floor, defeat any motions on the floor to pull the bill out. I know Governor Kelly continues to be focused on negotiating passage. I'm looking forward to getting past this primary election and focusing my efforts on other campaigns that could break the supermajority to help her with that. If expansion doesn't pass in this next session, it will be time to either call for citizen-led ballot initiatives so that rigid leaders cannot continue to simply stand in the way, or, even better, return our focus to passing single-payer insurance.
Next, we have Christina.
It is no mistake that it did not come, this vote of Medicaid expansion out of the House and Senate health committees did not come to the floor. They don't want their vote on the record to show that they're against Medicaid expansion. So many of our rural areas are pleading, both Democrats and Republicans, for Medicaid expansion. Instead of telling you what I would do, I'll tell you what I did do. I worked with our state organization partners and the governor's office to come up with a game plan. I knew this was a rare opportunity, and we wanted to make sure we had a game plan to move in lockstep with each other. Those organizations helped coordinate with the Senate side, and we were able to utilize the time wisely. This is what we have to do when you're in the minority party. Work together strategically and work with your allies. Work to make sure the constituents' voices are heard. You have to be a team player, and that is what I will bring to the Senate.
Next, we have Patrick.
I meet voters almost every day whose lives would be transformed if we had Medicaid expansion in this state. Whether you're working 30 hours at the quick shop where you're not eligible for your employer's insurance, or you're an overworked healthcare worker at St. Francis or KU Health, and you know that if Medicaid was expanded in Kansas, we would have more doctors, more nurses, more CNAs, more respiratory therapists, and more resources available for people maybe trying to take care of an aging parent, an aging spouse, a child with disabilities. And it would also free up dollars. I think everyone in this room has a story, knows how mental health is causing problems in our state and what needs to be done in Lawrence and Topeka. Medicaid expansion would provide millions of dollars every year to help with that problem. It's criminal, I think, that we have not expanded Medicaid in the state, and I will do everything in my power, including electing fellow Democrats to the Kansas legislature, to make this happen.
Next, we have Vic.
Like Senator Francisco, I actually got to enjoy voting in favor of Medicaid expansion and seeing it pass the legislature. The personality of the legislature has changed dramatically since that time. We had a number of brave Republicans that bucked the Republican governor at that time. They've all but been eliminated by their own party. The Speaker of the House sells insurance. He has a stranglehold on the House even having a chance to debating the subject. And if you don't obey, you are quickly punished and or eliminated. There is one solution to getting Medicaid expansion passed, and a couple of my colleagues have already mentioned it, and I know this is a nonpartisan group. If you don't elect more Democrats to the Kansas legislature, it will not happen as long as we have the Republican leadership that we do.
Next, we have ShaMecha.
For me, this is a personal issue. I am someone who has tried to do Obamacare for years and have always come to a place in that year, usually 3 to 4 months in, where I no longer can afford it and have to decide if I'm going to live or if I'm going to have health care, and usually living is what I have to focus on. The expansion of the Medicaid would be critical for neighborhoods that I represent, low and moderate income neighborhoods, where, as Patrick mentioned, we have people working hours upon hours and still not being able to do the basic coverage that they need so that they can thrive in their lives. So the lack of the Medicaid expansion is very hurtful and frustrating to watch. If I were elected, I would make sure to get a hearing somehow on that book as soon as possible. Ask for hearings as soon as possible. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to question number 4. Are you satisfied with the way our current legislator has funded public education, including special education? Why or why not? Explain. 1.5 minutes. You have 90 seconds and we're reversing. We'll begin with Cynthia.
Well, I was present in the State House for more than a decade, and one thing I can say that we knew in the State House is that the education lobby would never be satisfied with their funding, no matter what. As a result, unfortunately, their pleas for more funding are not always taken seriously. My husband was a very popular teacher at Free State High School. Scott Schmidt, who may have taught your children or your grandchildren. We need to take better care of teachers. What I hear from teachers is that increases in school funding do not make it to the classroom. This is what's unsatisfactory to me. School administrators are sucking up too many taxpayer dollars intended for the classroom. I mean, now we're questioning whether we even need a high dollar school superintendent in Lawrence, and I think that's an interesting question. I also strongly believe in separation of church and state. The legislature talks about private school vouchers, and while private schools help public schools handle the numbers, I would oppose taxpayer dollars being used to fund Bible studies, for example, things like that. So I have some satisfaction with the funding, but there are some areas where I'm deeply unsatisfied.
Next, we have Tyler.
Yeah, so this is a huge issue. I actually come from a background of working more on the administrative side and education. And I think that we are spending way too much money in schools. And the problem is, and the reason I say that is because it doesn't reach our kids. You know, administrators over the past 10 years have had an 87% increase on all of their, on average, on their salaries. And teachers have a 30%. That should be reversed. There's no excuse for that. The only money that I ever saw when I was a part of that was spent the way that it was supposed to was on special education. That's because there was big consequences to those school districts when they did not they did not abide by the rules and spend that money accordingly. That's the way that the schools should be funded, and it needs to be regulated exactly how the spending needs to be done so that our teachers and our students actually benefit from the money that leaves our taxpayers' pockets and goes into school districts. You know, I do believe that parents and concerned parents should have a choice of where their kids go. And I think that the taxpayer money that they put forward, just as much as anybody else, should be able to follow their student as to where they choose, whether it be public school or just changing school districts. You know, it is very hard and complicated to change school districts in a lot of areas in Kansas. And I believe that if you want to do that and you want to be able to transport your kids to a school that you think they're going to get a better education, you should be able to, and you should know that your funding and your money that you are earning each and every day is going towards your kids.
Next, we have ShaMecha.
So this is actually something I feel very comfortable talking about because I work in public schools. I've worked in public schools for Topeka Public Schools, Lawrence Public Schools, Auburn-Washburn School District. Talking to teachers, being in those spaces myself, I can tell you that no, your money is not getting into the spaces that they need to be. It's not getting to the classroom. Covering for a special education classroom one day, I was talking with a teacher and she said, you know, I'm having to physically adjust these students who are medically frail because they cannot hire someone based on the wages that the school district can offer to be able to do this work the way that it needs to get done. And that's not appropriate. It leaves the school districts open for lawsuits. It creates headaches for families who are trying to get the best education and care for their students possible. I think that there's room for conversation and things that can be done to make sure that the money is getting into the classroom the way it should be. But under the current conversations that we're having just around vouchers and open enrollment, I'm afraid that we still have some work to do, and I'm not incredibly sure if it's going to get done the 2025 legislative session. So there's some work that we can be doing.
Next, we have Vic.
Thank you. Well, the question was, am I satisfied? And I would say maybe, but only because for the last several years we've been under court order to fund appropriately our schools. We're about to enter a new era. The court has released jurisdiction over what the legislature does in funding schools. We're about to revisit some of the old times, and I'm very hopeful that people on the other side got the message so we don't end up in court again. As it relates to special ed, I'm okay with what we did this year. We funded $75 million in additional special ed funding, but that was only the first of the governor's plan, which was 4 years. I support the governor's plan, $75 million a year for 4 years, not just for one. And I'm a little nervous about whether that's going to happen as it should. As it relates to vouchers, as it relates to tuition tax credits, it's very simple for me. Public dollars should go to public education. End of story.
Next, we have Patrick.
My dad taught elementary school for 50 years until the day he died, and my mom taught for 46. My grandmother taught for decades, my great-grandmother taught for decades. Education, I can't get away from it in my family. And I know after knocking thousands of doors in this district that very few people are happy with the state of education in this state, and especially parents of children that have special needs, especially parents whose children need IEPs. They will tell you their children are not getting the resources that they need, and especially they know that certain families, certain schools, especially in Topeka, are not getting the same resources as the west side of Topeka or in Lawrence. And this is unacceptable. We can do more to lift all families, to lift especially those with special needs kids, and take care of those in Kansas that need it most. That's what I'm going to do for you in the 19th State Senate District.
Next we have Christina.
Absolutely not unsatisfied. Our conservative colleagues are wasting our time and wasting our potential trying to defund public education when we should be putting our efforts to fully funding public education, passing policies that will improve educational workforce and provide a holistic service to our children. I was disgusted to see how special education, also known as SPED, was used as a political chess piece, and for what? At the expense of our children who need it the most. We must do better, and we can do better. As an alumni of USD 497, I want nothing more than what's best for our kids. It breaks my heart every year to see how many schools we have lost here in Lawrence and how it has impacted the lives of our students. I got to speak to the student council at Hillcrest Elementary and their representatives from the 4th and 5th grade. And these students were telling me how they were getting bullied, the ones that came from Pinckney that closed. The implications of these decisions run way deeper than many might anticipate. But we have to help our school boards by passing more robust budgets at the state level. And we have to support our teachers and unions in their fight for fair wages and workforce.
Next we have Marci.
I think the legislature could do a much better job of funding public education. The funding formulas will be up for review this next session. The funding required by the Gannon case was finally fully phased in last year. However, since that case was filed during the 2010-11 school year, when special education was being funded at the 92% level, special education funding was not included in the evidentiary record. Since then, general funding has been undermined by reductions in funding for special education. State funding now covers only about 65% of excess costs. USD 497 had to transfer over $10 million of general funds to cover special education. Even more concerning are the math calculations discussed in the House that would double count local option budget funds for special education. Legislative leadership has allowed education funding to be considered as a separate bill so the policy provisions can be added. Much of that policy has never been heard in the Senate. I was very pleased this year when the Senate rejected Senate Bill 387, the conference committee report that included many of those unreasonable policies. Let's get back to educating our children. And as a member of the Early Childhood Education Caucus, I'd like to see public dollars go to funds for early early childhood education that would really benefit all our students.
Next we'll go to question number 5. What is the role of the state legislator in addressing the move toward renewable energy and energy conservation? You have 90 seconds. We will begin with ShaMecha.
I think the role of the state legislature with regard to renewables and sustainability is to provide a framework that local governments can use to be able to determine what their next steps need to be. I'm just going to speak from my personal experience with working with the city of Topeka compared to the city of Lawrence. We have a group called Topeka Sustainability Advisory Council, and they are currently working to bring in a sustainability officer, which I believe the city of Lawrence already has. And one of the reasons why this group is asking for a sustainability officer is because they see what happens when a local government takes a serious interest in ensuring that sustainability becomes a part of the local government's way of doing business, way of purchasing items. It makes a big difference in how we are able to ensure equity so that even individuals living in low and moderate income neighborhoods are seeing benefits from sustainability efforts, as opposed to just making people figure it out on their own, which is the challenge right now. Low income neighborhoods are, traditionally hotter, traditionally suffer with older homes that are not well insulated for air conditioning, heating. And so those are some of the issues that I feel that the state legislature, if they were able to continue to provide framework, expand the framework that they have, then it is possible to get more done.
Next, we have Vic.
Thank you. Well, as legislators, we need to keep all the time one eye on the Kansas Corporation Commission. They largely are responsible for regulating utilities and utility rates. We have to keep an eye on them that those rate structures are consumer friendly. We have to keep an eye on them that they're conservation friendly. We definitely need to keep an eye on them that their policies and regulations are friendly to the promotion of renewable energies. And we have to be ready to pass legislation to respond if that is not the case. I am very cautious about tax credits being extended, but in the case of conservation, if a tax credit will add to conservation, I'm very much for that. Not directly in the question, but related to it is we also have to keep a close eye on our use of water. For the first time in many years, well overdue, we have actually begun to implement a smart water plan. We need to be ever vigilant on that subject as well. And lastly, when it comes to serving in the legislature, you need to defer to those colleagues that are experts in the field. And I'm so proud to have served alongside 2 years with Senator Francisco because she is respected in the Senate as just one of those people.
Next, we have Patrick.
The current production of renewable energy around the world has laid claim to the lie, even as recently as the last few years, that we couldn't provide reliable energy, reliable baseload from clean resources. Here in Kansas, I think everyone thinks it's hot enough and we have enough sun, and we should be doing everything we can to take advantage of those resources and empowering individuals, empowering families, empowering businesses to make those adaptations to our environment so they can produce cleaner energy, cheaper, and more reliably than they can from the utilities. I think the legislature should do everything they can, especially looking at the utilities, to mandate higher production from clean resources. And I think that we should fully leverage the tax code to, again, empower families and businesses and individuals to make those modifications to their homes and businesses, whether it's heat pumps, whether it's solar panels, and things that also encourage conservation, like fixing older homes. And I know because I'm going through it myself right now at the house I have in Topeka, to make sure that, you know, maybe you don't have to run your furnace or run your AC as much just because the air is not rushing out. And we should do everything in the legislature to encourage that and provide refundable tax credits to make that possible.
Next, we have Christina.
I'm endorsed by Lead Locally, where there are many candidates across the country, such as myself, who are great New Deal leaders and champions. We hold values of not only being champions protecting our environment, but to promote environmental justice as well. Where marginalized communities and communities of color have taken the burden for so long. We must continue to protect Mother Earth. We must support policies and promote the empowerment of development for renewable energies and conservations. Studies have shown that Kansas has potential for solar and wind power, and if you drive west, you can see those projects in person. We must combat harmful policies that create more barriers for renewable energy projects that are rooted in climate change denial. When we see renewable policies locally, we just can't dismiss folks' concerns. We should provide them with further investigation and study. That's what happened here locally with the solar project, where the Public Health Department provided a study debunking misinformation. These decisions are rooted in civic engagement, data-driven approaches. We must continue to protect home rule, and if you don't know what that means, it means our local governments will continue to have the power and jurisdiction over the local governments. This is also where we see impacts of statewide bans, such as sanctuary cities a few years back. We must also promote environmental justice. This is why I'm a co-sponsor of HB 2327, which is discontinuing property tax exemptions for new quality pipeline properties. And this was trying to address the Keystone pipeline leak that happened in Washington, Kansas in 2022. We must continue to hold these fossil fuel companies accountable. We must continue to support the development of renewable energies.
Next, we have Marci.
15 years ago, the legislature set a standard for investor-owned utilities to have renewable production capacity for 20% of their peak demand by 2020. The goal was met well ahead of schedule. Utilities continue to expand their renewable capacities because it's cost efficient. Wind now generates almost 40% of our region's energy use. The state legislature should add funding and staff for the State Energy Office. Now it's just one half-time person, and work with that office to set new goals and requirements as part of adoption of the State Energy Plan. The Senate Utilities Committee held hearings focused on transmission costs, supporting changes proposed by the Southwest Power Pool and adopted by FERC, to assign more of the cost of the needed new transmission to end users in states other than production states like Kansas. The legislature increased the percentage of net metering for distributed solar so that for an investor-owned utility, they will now be required to accommodate 1 and now up to 5% of capacity for distributed solar. The requirements for electric cooperatives need to be reviewed next. The Kansas Corporation Commission has approved Evergy's plan for efficiency programs. The legislature should do their part by adopting statewide energy conservation building codes to ensure that new buildings meet efficiency standards. If utilities are not affordable, housing will not be affordable.
Next we have Cynthia.
So I'm a lawyer, and I worked for Kansas City Power and Light for many years, including representing them in the State House, so I worked on many of these issues. And what I know, as Marci kind of alluded to, is that our public utility companies, they're eager to be engaged and even taking lead on renewable energy and energy conservation. So generally, I believe that the market will move towards these goals, and little, if any, involvement by the state legislature is really needed. This might be an issue more appropriate for local governments. Regarding windmills, we've heard about how windmills are a concern for the environment, but what I hear about from my rural friends is that the behavior of the windmill companies, that when these windmills stop working, they just abandon them on the farm property, and the farmers are even trying to figure out, do they need to bury these things or what? So there might be some more work to be done on that, but it seems that would be a simple problem to solve.
Next we have Tyler.
I think a big part that gets looked over when we looked at renewable energy is nature conservation. When we look at renewable energy source, we see that nature is harmed over and over again. When we see wind turbines, you see that your cost, if you sign up for wind programs with utility companies, it costs you more because the price of maintaining the wind turbines, which are primarily used in Kansas, is ineffective and it's inefficient. So our maintenance costs are higher, so your electricity costs more, making it more impossible to afford your utilities here in Kansas. If we look at we can also look at weather patterns that are caused through wind turbines and how they're affected. I think that the biggest part that we need to really look at is energy conservation in homes, making things more efficient. The more efficiency, the less electricity you use, we can sustain ourselves and find more of a sustainable use while we try to find a renewable resource and for electricity that doesn't harm our natural environments and the nature around us. So nature conservation is a huge thing. Renewable energy is nice to talk about and the green initiatives, but realistically, we're hurting nature around us, and that's a huge problem.
Thank you. We'll go to question 6. In closing, what additional important issues are facing the Kansas Senate that you are uniquely equipped to address? You have 2 minutes. We will begin with Christina.
I'm running to bring my lived experiences to the state Senate. I'm a renter in an apartment. I work multiple jobs just to try to make ends meet, and I hold student loan debt, all which are not unique to just myself, but to many Kansans across our state. Yet, we currently do not have a state senator in our state Senate who holds all these lived experiences while shaping our state policies. Our community faces a housing crisis. and fight for tenants' rights as renters, and I see my rent increase every year. The thought of owning a home is a joke at this point. With a conservative legislature, we will face ignorant comments on how millennials and Gen Z need to pull themselves up from their bootstraps to not be lazy. The median age of the Kansas State Senate here is 62. The median age in the Kansas State Senate District is 37, which is my generation. This is why we need someone in the background there. My professional background is in public health, where I have my master's in public health from the KU Med, and during the pandemic, I was one of the managers who got the COVID-19 call center here in Douglas County up and running. Public health is my background, has helped me shape policy and combat a lot of misinformation in the health committee, as well lead policy from a public health lens. Lastly, being Native American and the only Native American currently in our Kansas State legislature has widened my eyes to how important it is to have someone in our legislature who knows about tribal law and policy. At least once a year, the legislature handles tribal business, and I spend a lot of my time happily educating my colleagues. In just the 4 years I've been in the House, I got a Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples bill passed my first year. I helped pass out 2 casino compact bills, making when I was a ranking minority on the Joint Committee on State and Tribal Relations, and recently got my Indian Child Welfare Act bill a hearing, which is currently in Judicial Council review with tribal judges from Kansas and Oklahoma. Because of all of this, I've had the amazing opportunity to represent my community from Germany to the White House to Vogue, college students from Fort Hays, farmers and ranchers and producers from Garden City, and many other college students across our community. I'm a proud alumni of Lawrence, and I'm happy to be born and raised here, and I use all these experiences to represent my community.
Next, we have Marci.
The legislature passed tax relief, but not much of it reduced property taxes, the concern I'm hearing most when knocking on doors. During the recent special session, Senator Holland and I introduced Senate Bill 2, an alternative that would have tripled residential property deductions, reduced property taxes further for disabled veterans, and provided some reductions for commercial and agricultural properties. I worked on those numbers. Affordable housing is a concern for Lawrence and communities throughout Kansas. My husband Joe and I have experience in renovating housing and keeping it affordable. I'm also working to identify opportunities for additional housing as a member of Lawrence's Land Development Code Advisory Board. I do understand the need to address the income side of the issue. Years ago, I introduced the bill that raised the minimum wage in Kansas. We need to further increase that and making it a living wage. The legislature must continue to address both the quality and quantity of water supplies. Once again, let me thank the sponsors of this forum. Being a member of the League of Women Voters, State Study on Watershed Districts gave me a great introduction to water issues in Kansas. My amendments to the state water plan included an increase of $5 million in annual funding. Some of that funding is earmarked for technical support and investments for incorporated communities. Knowing something about our state's history, another of my amendments to the plan added the ability for an unincorporated community to get those grants if they were a part of a national park site, making those grants available to Nicodemus. I've earned a reputation for reading the bills, understanding the intent, and suggesting changes to improve the wording of legislation and the outcomes. I've built relationships based on trust. I am well positioned to get the best outcomes for Lawrence and Douglas County. I would appreciate your vote.
Next, we have Cynthia.
So the newly drawn Senate District 19 goes from northwest Lawrence, west of Castle, through Douglas County, and then to the west into Shawnee County. I want you to know I'm the only candidate for this seat who lives in Douglas County. I'm a lawyer. I moved to Lawrence almost 30 years ago to work for the Golf Course Superintendents Association. And as I've said, I've covered the Kansas State House for a long time, 12 years. And I'm known to the leadership and respected as an effective problem solver. I know how to get things done as well as anyone. Taxes, we didn't talk about taxes, but everyone is concerned about taxes. We need tax relief in Kansas. What I do, and I think that it would help the legislature to always remember, is that dollars being spent are taxpayer dollars. They're your dollars, they're my dollars, and as a senator, I would never lose sight of that. Other things I've done and other issues where I have expertise, I volunteered as a CASA for a teen girl, so I know a lot about foster care. I held a volunteer position as Kansas Director for Amnesty International USA, so I know a lot about gun violence in our country. I volunteered at the border, feeding families and filling out asylum applications as a lawyer, so I know a lot about our refugee crisis. I've circled the globe twice. My primary area of expertise is healthcare. I was on the legal team of the OTC drug industry during the Tylenol tampering crisis. I was general counsel for the American Association of Blood Banks when it was discovered that HIV was in the blood supply. With my experience in managing these high-profile cases and my state house experience, I have the moxie to hit the ground running and be a great senator. Again, I am a moderate Republican. I'm a fiscal conservative and moderate on social justice issues. We need more of us in the legislature. Thanks for your vote.
Next, we have Tyler.
We can all agree that taxes are too high. Growing up in District 19 and even newly structured, but in the area of District 19, I faced poverty from a young age, homelessness, and as we went forward, I had to work 2 to 3 jobs and eventually was able to buy my own home. When I bought my home in District 19, I saw that the rise of taxes increased the cost of living. As I saw utilities go up, I saw the prices there, and it becomes almost unaffordable. As I see that, you see a direct correlation in people that rent. Taxes are too high, the cost of living is too high. As we move forward, we need to be able to keep these down. A big part of that is budgeting, not only just on a state level, but on a local level. It is a part of the state representative's job to really work with their local communities, the people that they represent, and they need to be heard and they need to be informing. We need to inform our voters, we need to inform our people, our citizens, our youth. We need to be educating them, and we need to be moving them forward in positions of leadership to help keep the cost of living down, keep fighting for their rights, and keep fighting for everything that they fight so hard to maintain each and every day. As we, so I think with that, I also believe that the biggest problem that we're facing is with our youth. Our youth need to be educated, our youth need to be protected, and our youth need to be cared for. We have a big problem in this country with our youth, and we keep setting them to the side. These are big social issues, and it's not talked about enough. We need to inform them on how to vote. We need to inform them on how to be involved in their communities. We need to inform them on how to be a part of their society. Because when they're 18, they're supposed to contribute to society, but they don't know how to contribute in a political sense, and they're really shunned by an older generation. So we need to be able to we need to be informing our youth. We need to lower our cost of living. We need to increase our public involvement and at the local, city, and state levels. Thank you so much.
Next, we have ShaMecha.
So I'm going to echo a little bit off of what Christina said. The biggest thing that I bring to this opportunity is my lived experience. Coincidentally enough, Tyler went to Topeka High School around the same time that I was in substitute teaching in that area. His grandfather actually owns a church in my neighborhood, so we have some cross connection. What he's talking about, the unhoused, the poverty, that is a major issue in District 19. On the Lawrence side, just walking the neighborhoods in Lawrence, I can tell you that I don't see as much of the challenges, and I don't know that Lawrence residents see the challenges from the same perspective that we do as Topekans. When you start to cross into Shawnee County, and you see how rural poverty and urban poverty start to take a hold, and what that does to individuals who are living with the trauma of incarceration, violence, not being able to find healthy food options, it is a lot more than just policy. You need a legislator who has the heart to engage conversation all across this district so that you can see in Lawrence what is happening in Topeka, and Topeka can see what's going on in Lawrence and everything in between. As an educator, particularly as a substitute teacher, my role has always been to walk into a space that is often dealing with chaos and try to find some way forward. That is the gift that I bring to this opportunity as a state senator. I can walk into chaos and find the path forward. I want the storytelling aspect to be more clear at the state level, and that's why I hope for your vote. Thank you.
Next, we have Vic.
Thank you. Thank you to the league. I've enjoyed working with the league alongside them. My service as ranking minority member on the House Elections Committee. My thank you to the NAACP. I am one person up here that enjoys a lifetime membership in that organization, and I hope to enjoy that for some time yet. I want to thank all my friends up here who are running for this seat. I appreciate them taking the time to come to this forum. This is so important to the democratic process, and I appreciate each and every one of them for being here. If you don't think experience is important, I'm not your guy. But I have served in the Senate, I have served in the House, I'm currently serving as the House Democratic Leader. Some people call it Minority Leader. I call it the Democratic Leader, and I'm so proud of that title and the responsibilities that go with it. We need, as I said before, and I will say it 100 more times, even in front of a nonpartisan crowd, we need more Democrats in the Kansas legislature if you expect any of these things that we've discussed to get better. Somebody's calling. As far as me, as far as what I bring to the table, property tax relief. I enjoyed co-authoring a package of property tax relief bills along with your own Lawrence Representative Mike Amix. Our three-part plan would have resulted in residential taxes being decreased by 17%. We gave this much relief in the area of property taxes last year. We have much more to do. And lastly, I want to say that the senator that represents this district has to understand the concentration of state employees and retirees in this district, and they have to be the principal spokesperson for that group of people.
Next, we have Patrick.
I'm the proud son of two teachers, and my parents understood the true cost of the Brownback tax experiment. And we are never more than one vote away in Kansas from that happening again. We saw them try to do it in this session. We saw them try to do it in 2023 when Vic Miller supported the flat tax in March of 2023. And we will see those tax games every session moving forward until we elect more Democrats. I'm proud to have served on board the USS Ronald Reagan. I'm proud to have served the Special Forces Unit in Bahrain, hunting Iranians. I'm proud to have served the Office of Naval Intelligence. And when I saw the attack on the Capitol in 2020, I knew that Kansas needed me here in public service more than the Navy needed me in uniform. I'm proud to still serve in the Naval Reserve. I'm proud to have led sailors abroad, sailors at sea, but we need people with new experience in Kansas. We have some people in office in Kansas that have been elected for almost 50 years. And in the last 50 years, we went from an unprecedented rights, guaranteed rights for women to have access to healthcare. Griswold versus Connecticut, guaranteed access to contraception, to family planning. And now we have people, even Democrats, that are supporting extremist Republicans like Kansans for Life and Chris Kobach to take those protections away. We have a Congress and a Supreme Court that want to be handmaidens for that vision all across the country. We need state legislatures to be that bulwark for democracy, to be that bulwark for protecting women's rights, to be that bulwark for families trying to get by and thrive in Kansas, just the same way that my family did when they settled here 160 years ago. If you could help me do this, I'm excited to get to work for you. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Marci Francisco, Christina Haswood, Patrick Schmidt, Vic Miller, ShaMecha King-Sims, Tyler Wible, Cynthia Smith. I'd like to thank all of you for participating in our forum today.